We're pleased to welcome Representative David Meade. He is the Speaker Pro Tem in the Kentucky Legislature. Speaker, as a speaker, is that the right term?
That is what the common time.
Speaker Meade, appreciate the time. Thank you very much, and welcome to our show. And so, what do you make of the COVID-19 response? I know that I've had other Republicans on before, and they've expressed maybe some, I guess, tepid positive reviews of what Governor Beshear has done. He's done okay, but some criticisms as well. I was talking earlier about my frustrations that I'm hearing from our listeners about failed attempts to access unemployment, to get responses, get their cases ruled on, get answers questioned. From your perspective overall, how's the governor done and how's the government done?
Well, I think early on the governor did very well. I think the first few days he did the right thing, knowing that what we know about this pandemic, that shutting things down for a short period of time just to inform folks and get them the information they need to let them know how dangerous this can be and how they need to social distance if they're in a vulnerable population. That was the right thing to do, but he immediately needed to start looking towards how do we reopen this economy, how do we get things back on track, and I think that took a little bit longer than it should have. And I think that our unemployment insurance issue has been the biggest, I won't say disaster, but it has been a huge problem for us as we've gone through this. I mean, right now, Kentucky is, according to our workforce numbers, we are the highest in the country for jobless claims right now. We rank third in the nation for our biggest increase in unemployment claims since the start of this crisis. And as we started this, we knew, all of us could see that shutting down the economy was going to create a large volume of unemployment insurance claims, and we weren't prepared for it. We had 12 people working in the office when that occurred, and they just couldn't handle the overflow of calls coming in, and now we have about 1,000, but yet they're still not trained on much other than just being able to answer simple questions right now. So we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, it does seem like, I think that, there are pros and cons to every response, and that doesn't, I think it goes with Governor Beshear and every governor and mayor and even the president. Today, there's things they've done well, things they've not done well. It does seem like that the loudest criticism being lodged against Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is dealing with the unemployment. But I do think the overall, most of the people in the state, I think overall believe that, let's put it this way. I think if the election against Matt Bevin were held today, he'd win by more than 5,000 votes, which he won by last time. I think most Kentuckians would give him a passing grade overall.
I think you're right. That's what I'm picking up out in the communities as well. And no one can predict a pandemic like this, and no one knows how they're going to respond. We've made some mistakes along the way. His administration's made certain mistakes, but overall, I think in the initial run of this, he's done a good job. Again, I think that all of us are looking at what can we do to best protect the Kentuckians and citizens of this state. But I think we just agree about how we need to go. We need to go forward with this, especially with reopening this economy and things.
We're talking with the Speaker David Meade about the COVID-19 response here in Kentucky. Speaker, obviously when you have something that you can't expect or anticipate, you playing catch up the entire time, and I think with respect to Governor Beshear and the state government, that's what they've been doing. They're doing their best to make the best of a terrible situation. When we get into session next January, how much attention will be applied to trying to be better prepared in case something like this happens again in the near future? It's difficult to anticipate exactly what kind of virus it may be, but I think we did see our weaknesses going through it this time around. How much attention will be applied to trying to find ways to shore up some of those weaknesses so that something like this happens again, we're better prepared in advance of it?
I think you're going to see a lot of attention paid to that. Ray, we're even doing that right now with our interim joint committees. Right now, every single one of those committees are making this an issue. I think this week, as we went through the first week of interim committees, that every single committee had this on their agenda. Education this week, I think they heard from some of the school superintendents sharing their concerns about how do we meet the CDC guidelines for social distancing when we bring students back, especially in transportation and in classroom learning. And then, of course, agriculture, they heard about how this is affecting our food supply, and that is easy for us to see. You can go into any supermarket right now, look at the shelves, and see that this is affecting our food supply, especially in the beef industry, as we are one of the top beef industry states in the nation. We're seeing a huge effect there. The prices in the store are hitting our consumers' pocketbooks, but also our farmers are being hit because they're not being paid the prices that they need on cattle sales. So we're seeing that as an economic impact. And then in our Judiciary Committee this week, they've even talked and discussed about what are the checks and balances for the governor's powers in this state of emergency, and how is the court system proceeding. There's various topics in there. They spoke with Attorney General Daniel Cameron this week, and he has voiced some of the same concerns we've talked about today, from reopening Kentucky to that violation of possible personal liberties, and then the unemployment insurance. And so we're already talking about those things. I think the biggest issue for me that bothers me for the near future is the appropriations revenue. When they heard from the consensus forecasting group this week, and those economists told them that we're going to probably see about a $500 million shortfall in our current budget, and almost a $200 million shortfall in the road fund. That's very concerning going forward right now.
Well, it really is, and I think it was smart to only do a one-year budget this time around, because it's impossible to project ahead. And in fact, I think it's really impossible to predict six months ahead, let alone 2 years, when you have no idea what the real economic impact is of lost revenue from what's happened here in the state. So I think it's good. Should Kentucky go to producing a budget every year versus every 2 years? I mean, it seems like the every 2 years seems like a little bit of an antiquated idea, and whatever measures, constitutional or otherwise, that need to be changed, is that something that should be changed, where you're producing a full budget every year versus every 2 years?
Well, I think there's pros and cons to both of those. When we look at a 2-year budget and we're able to set those numbers, that really does help us with being able to plan further out into the future for our state. But in a situation like this, it was especially helpful because we had to focus on the here and now, and not knowing, we're not having good predictions for what the future would hold, made it just essential for us to do that one-year budget. But I think that, again, there are pros and cons to that. Doing a one-year budget probably can make us a little more accurate, because it's easier to see 12 months out than it is 24. But for the planning of this state and being able to prepare for things like road projects and how we're going to fund our health departments and things like that, it's better for us to be able to see for the longer term.
We're talking with Speaker David Meade about the upcoming general session. You mentioned Daniel Cameron and about the emergency powers and them being the need to curbing those. I got to tell you, and I'm not sure what the path is to make some changes, but I think and I'm not even talking specifically this situation and specifically with this particular governor, but I do see a problem where a governor can enact executive orders, and legislators that are not in session really have no power to check that power. Let me come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. Why shouldn't the legislature be able to call their own session? Why should they have to rely on the governor to allow them to call them to session to go to work? Why shouldn't the legislature be able to call themselves? And I know that there's laws and amendments in place that prevent that, but shouldn't those be changed so the legislature has control over when they work and not the governor? Because by allowing the governor to have that power, it doesn't really create an equal balance of power in Kentucky, I don't think.
Well, you're exactly right, and Speaker Osborne actually had a bill to that effect this year that would do a constitutional amendment, place that on the ballot for the voters of this state to look at. And what it was going to do was allow the legislature to save days during the legislative session, and those days that they banked, then they could call themselves back into special session to use those days. So it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers any more money. I think it was a great plan that he had developed. And I would like to see something like that done. And you're seeing a lot of other states go to something like that. They've either put in place a 30-day limit or a 2-week limit for executive powers when they create these executive orders under the emergency powers, or they've created amendments for them to be able to call themselves back into session. So it's been a concern across the nation as well.
Speaker Meade, I know that you're paying attention to what's going on around our state and also around our country the last 8 or 9, I guess almost close to 2 weeks now, with obviously the death of the tragedy of Breonna Taylor back in March, and of course the George Floyd has taken the attention back on the front page with the issue of police brutality. I mean, you know that there's going to be legislation brought forward coming up in January. What can the legislature do to reform law enforcement in a way that people feel like that they're going to be treated fairly and equally across the board? Because there are concerns from people of color and the black community that they're unfairly targeted and that they're unfairly abused by police officers in a way that maybe the white communities don't experience. What can legislators do to begin to reform law enforcement so that people of all colors feel like that they're getting a fair shake? What can they do? What can you guys do?
You know, Larry, that is an issue that everyone needs to feel like they are being treated fairly, and they have the right to feel that they're safe in this state. As far as what we can do, that is a little bit out of my expertise. Leave that up to the Judiciary Committee as they meet and they go through this, and they've had some meetings and started those discussions this week. But from my standpoint, you know, all I'm going to say is that I personally condemn any form of racism and hate. And as a Christian, I believe that the ground that we're talking about is even at the foot of the cross. That prejudice, racism, it can't grow in that soil from that ground. And as a legislator and a member of House leadership, I'll add that we must be too busy to hate and too committed to moving our state forward to waste time holding people back like that. And so, you know, as I said, it's kind of out of my expertise, and we're going to let the Judiciary Committee meet and come up with some solutions for that. But I think you're right. It's going to be an issue that we are going to look at next year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I've talked to people who work in the legislature, and I know that the bills are being worked on, legislation is being worked on now. It's definitely going to be on the forefront. It'll be interesting to see what gets proposed, what's get written, and what actually gets passed. Speaker, Meade, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. We're out of time, but always good talking with you.
You too. Thank you so much.